Hi, Deborah. It's so nice that you are always there. I appreciate it. Let me get my lighting looking good. Oh, yeah, looking great. Can you hear me okay? Everything sound good? Just give me a thumbs up if it is the case. Looks like volume is good here. The screen. Let's see if there's any other things I'm missing here. All right. Cool. Thank you, Deborah. Anyway, so as we kind of, give a second for people to trickle in. Speaking of that, I am going to go run and use the little boy's room real quick, like I should have 3 minutes ago. And as soon as I get back, we will start. Okay. Oh, hi everyone. I'm back in quicker than thought. So welcome everybody to episode number 3 of T3 Reads TBJR. Hey, it's something I've been blessed with my whole life is, coming up with acronyms and things like that. And speaking to TBJR, I just looked down, and at my feet on top of my printer is this photo of my dad teaching stalking at the old tracker farm in 1980 something. And that table, that is still the same table that, as far as I know. What's up, Joe? Did you receive your illustration, right? Yeah, so this table is still the table that is on the stage in the primitive camp. And, when I think of personally how many thousands of people I've stood in front of behind that table teaching, and the history behind it, and how many people have demonstrated everything from stalking on it to over here near this near where my dad's foot that's on the actual table is, there's a bunch of kind of grooves cut out from people teaching about knives and tools, and they usually would take a tracker knife and use the saw portion. And every so often, every couple of years, we'd have to replace a board, but for the most part, the top has remained intact this entire time. And it's just one of those things. It's growing up around the tracker school. I was always blessed with all these new people coming every month. And we used to, back when I was a kid, we ran classes. Basically, it was a week on, week off, week on, week off. And when I ran the school, we did 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So I used to get so excited because, every other week, a whole new group of friends would come that I got to annoy and terrorize as a child. And then, growing up, my parents, a beautiful robin just landed on the branch right outside my window. And then my parents divorced when I was around 12 and lived in suburbia and fell into that trap and ended up becoming an addict because I had lost my connection to nature. And then, going back to the tracker school as an adult and now as a teacher in it was like the spring of 99. And just the comfort in knowing that the same things had been on the same places on the stage or hanging on the walls as they had been my entire life. And that's one of the reasons why these last few months have been really tough on me is I'm the type of person that likes to know where my things are. And especially because in order to adequately do my job, teach my classes, I need props and tools and raw materials. And having been separated from that stuff for a month now, and it was supposed to be coming this week, but Portland, well, the whole Western Seaboard, but we got about, let's say, maybe 4 inches of snow in the last 36 hours. And 3 inches of snow in Portland, Oregon is the equivalent of 90 feet everywhere else. It like shuts the city down. The city of Portland has 2 snowplows. So basically, they have to wait for the surrounding towns to plow their roads to come help. And of course, people don't know how to drive in the snow, but it does make for some good tracking. So I'm hoping to do some of that tomorrow. But yeah, I've one of the reasons for this or should I say, this new live stream twice weekly series is born of just trying to create content to talk about until I can get my stuff back and I can get my full schedule up and get back to, doing what I do the best, and that is teaching and trying to get myself out of just some gnarly situations that I should not have ended up in the first place. Anyway, just some quick news before I start reading. So yeah, this week's auction went pretty well. Somebody is now the proud owner of the original. So when my dad wanted to design the tracker knife, he went and met actually out here in Kirkland, Washington. He met with a local knife maker and they spent some time together. And the knife maker took my dad's ideas and sketched out, what he thought my dad wanted in what would become the tracker knife. So, in my hand, I hold this letter that's addressed to my dad, dated June 8th, 1981. And he talks about, about here's some ideas after our conversation, types of steel, and then, the original tracker knife almost looked like that, which is very akin to a dive knife. But this is one of the items that did auction this week. 2 other things I had up, which I was really surprised nobody bid on, was I have in the first ever printed copy of the chaptered lawns from the field guide to I think it's nature. Is it awareness or is it this one? Is it anyway? It's the chapter about lawns, and then it's literally fresh off of his printer, uncorrected, 17 pages long. And then I have another 3-page introduction to one of his books as well. Now, my original intent with this series was I was planning on, reading my dad's works in chronological order, i.e. starting with the tracker and just going a chapter per episode. And the other night when I went to go do episode 2, and I actually broke my own rule the first night because I actually read Go Ask the Mice for the first episode. So on the night of the second episode, I went to go reach for a copy of the tracker, and my Innervision hit me and said, no, grab the vision. And Innervision told me to read Earth Mother Speaks, which is a very powerful chapter. So after thinking about it, I'm going to kind of abandon the idea of chronological order, and I'm going to base what I do during these sessions on Innervision. And so tonight I will be reading from my father's field guide to nature observation and tracking. Now, if I can say one thing about this chapter that I'm about to read, I would say that a humongous portion of what I teach to my students, be it online or in person, can be, summed up in this one chapter I'm going to read tonight. I of course teach, wilderness survival skills, even though I hate that word, same way my father did. I teach the skills all of our ancestors used to live close to the earth. But I also, my goal in life is to teach people to be more aware and awake and alive. And, as my father, often said, with the, I forget which author said it, but, the making your avocation your vocation, and not just being another mindless gray mass that moves through life chasing the false gods of the flesh, only to get to the end and realize that they were lied to, and that the magic of life was not in the goal, in the success. It was in the journey to get there. And, the way I look at my own practices, whether it's with photography or going out in the woods to do anything, is I treat every trip out into the woods as if it's an entire lifetime. And being that I was trained by my father and taught how to literally squeeze every drop out of every day, out of every moment, every time I go in the woods, I just become a super sponge. And, I feel bad for people that go on walks in the woods with me, especially if I have my camera with me, because they may have had this idea we're going on a 2-mile hike, but we might not make it further than a couple hundred yards because I can't take more than 3 steps in nature without finding something that is art. Nature is art, is beauty, and not just, to the physical eye, but the beauty of the network that connects everything, both physically through mycelia and the spirit that moves in and through all things. And in this chapter, called Pathways to Nature, he, kind of goes into the just, kind of the overall, basically thought soup, as I call it, concepts to think about, that can really, if you apply them to your everyday life, can have a dramatic effect. I often, our lifespans are so infinitesimal when compared to nature time or cosmic time. And being that we have such a short time here, I want to experience as much as possible. And that's why I always laugh whenever I'm at a store or something and waiting in line and the cashier is like, "Oh, I'm sorry for the wait. I'll be right there." And I'm like, "It's all right. Life is too short to hurry. Life is too short to hurry." Anyway, yeah. So this, this chapter in particular, wait, did I skip it already? Is particularly important to my teaching and is the foundation to pretty much all that I teach, because if you don't have a heightened sense of awareness, you can't be a good tracker. As my father said, awareness and tracking are inseparable twins. I would like to add wide angle vision in there as a triplet. Without learning how to walk a little bit differently, so we're not always staring at a 45-degree angle of the ground in front of us. Which reminds me, I actually just started a new learning thing on my YouTube channel. I uploaded the first of a 5-part series on how to be better at stalking and movement by giving you certain exercises to work on. And I'm actually going to film part 2 as soon as we are done here. But yeah, this is a hugely important chapter, not just for pathways to nature. I would personally rename this Pathways to Life. Let me take a little sip of Thomas Carlyle once said, "The tragedy in life is not what men suffer, but what they miss." I often quote this statement when I have a new class of students looking up at me from the benches and hay bales in the old barn on my New Jersey farm. God, I miss that place so much. To let it sink in, I go on to ask them a string of questions about the immediate area. Their reaction is usually one of hidden embarrassment. Most of my new students have not noticed the wind direction, the scents in the air, the raccoon tracks by the barn, the deer on the far side of the alfalfa field, or the squeaks of mice in the rafters. The realization dawns on them that not only are they shut off from the most profound messages of nature, but even from some of the most obvious ones. Such is the case with most of us. Yet the human potential for a keen sensitivity to connection to nature is nothing short of amazing. Consider, for instance, the Native American scout of centuries past. As a protector and provider, the scout served as the eyes and ears for the tribe. He traveled alone or in small groups, wearing little more than a loincloth and moccasins, moved silently, leaving hardly a trace of their passage. If necessary, they could run for 2 to 3 days without stopping. He found his way by the sun, stars, and variations in the landscape. He could stalk as silently as a mountain lion and catch game with his bare hands. He could detect the presence of a fox in the croak of a tree frog and see the coming of a storm in the flight of a mosquito. He knew his environment intimately and felt a deep reverence for all the creatures that shared it with him. I cannot state how crucial that last part is. The scout is an example of nature observation at its best. His life was a communion with nature. His skills at times seemed to border on the magical, but they were not. They were an expression of the potential that is in all of us. Each skill was painstakingly learned by each generation and lovingly passed on. Many years of teaching and practice went into the learning, just as our own children go through many years of classroom learning to assimilate the skills our own society considers important. Since we are no longer hunter-gatherers, it is not as important for us to be aware and alert of nature. Our society does not place much premium on nature awareness because modern conveniences have taken away its survival value. But we pay an unseen price for our comforts. Our senses, like unused muscles, either weaken and atrophy or are never developed to their full potential. Nature is far more colorful and fascinating than most of us can imagine, but our minds are so clouded by modern thought patterns that stimuli that we do not perceive the pure and natural except through a distorting lens. The state is a little like walking around wearing sunglasses. After a while, the world looks a little duller and darker than it actually is. Gradually, we become to accept the dullness as normal until we take the glasses off and realize, sometimes with a shock of surprise, just how bright and beautiful the world really is. Clearing the mind. How can we begin to overcome the mental barriers to nature observation? The first and most important step is to clear the mind of all the clutter that is accumulated during the process of daily living. This mental purification actually occurs quite naturally during an extended stay in the wilderness. And that's one of the primary reasons when somebody comes to me for a day-long class, I have them typically come the evening before so they can camp out and drop into nature time instead of just getting out of a car and going right to class. Let's see. I don't know. Where was I? Man? This mental purification actually occurs quite naturally during an extended stay in the wilderness. Like a fountain of clear water, nature keeps pouring into our muddied cup, finally washing away the bothersome elements until we see clearly enough to feel a connection with the environment. Many times I've watched harried people take to the woods and gradually let down as they absorbed the more natural rhythms around them. But often the trips we take are too short for such process to occur. For most of us, it seems, Saturday is a mad rush to get to our wilderness destination, and Sunday is a mad rush to get back. And boy, is that true around here. Very little time is actually spent being there. Very little time is spent experiencing. Let go of time. There are several ways of combating this syndrome. First is to consciously let go of time. Begin by thinking of time as a convenience rather than a burden. Know it for what it is, a system concocted by people to help them keep track of where they are in relation to each other and the things around them. Know also that there is a dimension beyond time that can only be reached by letting go of society's schedules and constraints and adopting a willingness to be alone and absorbed in the moment. If you want to observe more in nature, take off your watch and pay more attention to your internal timekeeper. Let the terrain and your interests dictate your schedule. Certainly, you may have a specific time to be back home or be back on the job. Maybe you only have an hour or two to spend in the park. The amount of time doesn't matter. 10 minutes can be an eternity if you are living in the present moment. In the now, you have no past or future, and everything is experienced freshly. A person without a past has never seen a tree, a mud puddle, or a blade of grass. A person without a future is free of worries and fears and open to whatever may cross his or her path. Slow down. Another thing that will help you escape the time trap is to consciously slow down. Number one stalking tip, T3 approved. You can observe very little in the woods when hurrying along a trail. In my frequent wanderings around my farm, I often walk so slowly that it is frustrating even to my students. But there are discoveries that can only be made when traveling at a snail's pace. A slower pace makes it easier for your eyes to pick up the flick of a deer's tail or the claw marks of a bobcat. A slower pace leaves your ears open to the call. Ears open to the call of the whippoorwill and the rustlings of rodents. A slower pace means a calmer mind, which allows the impressions of nature to register more clearly. All the great naturalists have recognized the value of slowing down, and they have all made their most cherished discoveries in the atmosphere of timelessness it creates. Quick side note, my dad talks about slowing down to, pick out tracks. I was once, I think it was me and my dad and Eddie Starnader driving down the sand road into the primitive camp at about 40, and my dad's driving along, and he's not even looking out of the window. He's looking ahead, and he's like, "Bear track." Stops the Hummer, and we all get out, and sure enough, 15 yards back, there's this bear track. And I'm sitting there thinking, how the hell did he see the bear track? He was in, obviously he was in wide angle vision, but it was on the ground. Just one of those another dad mysteries I'll forever be asking. Sit down. The only thing better than knowing your pace is to stop altogether and sit down. One Saturday morning before sunup, I drove to the trailhead leading to Sunfish Pond, a relatively isolated spot along the Appalachian Trail. The trail is one of the nation's most well-traveled mountain pathways, most summer days, especially on weekends. It is packed with people rambling on their eager ways from one place to another, but under the right circumstances, there is much to be seen there. And I was early enough to have beaten the rush. I walked slowly up the trail to the well-used deer run that connected with it and sat down under an old snag to watch the day come alive. God, there's nothing like those early morning sits. I calmed myself and began to blend with the flow of the woods. In time, I became part of the dead tree that was my resting place. As the stars faded, I felt peaceful and at one with my surroundings. Slowly, the night sky brightened and bird voices rose to herald the oncoming sun. Just before the sun glinted over the horizon, a chipmunk scurried over a log and ran across my feet. A moment later, a raccoon returned from her night's foraging, ambled up to the tree, and unwittingly used my shoulder to help her up to her den. And I actually had that same experience happen to me in Illinois. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, okay. The first rays of sun were marvelous as they cast their light and warmth on the earth. Also, they splashed across the rusty coat of a red fox, which dazzled my eyes as it trotted across the trail. Before the sun had burned another 2 hours into the day, I had seen a buck break cover and was intently watching a doe and her fawn approach along the deer run leading to the trail. The morning air was still cold, and I could see the vapor steaming from their nostrils. They came down the trail very calmly and deliberately, and as they passed in front of my hiding place, I gently reached out and allowed my fingertips to glide along the doe's back. In the next moment, the woods seemed to have been hit by a shotgun blast. The forest exploded into a frenzy of flying birds and diving chipmunks. Even the flowers seemed to close up. When all the animals had found their hiding places, the only sound left was the raucous scolding of the jays. It was a sound I knew very well. Deciding the day had truly begun, I walked back down the trail and soon encountered several fully laden backpackers. They were walking very fast and they were excited. They had left their camp before sunup and they had already covered 7 miles. That would put them at their next planned campsite well before noon. If they really hurried, they said, they might even be able to make tomorrow's campsite a day ahead of schedule. I asked them if they had seen anything interesting, and they excitedly told me about a large buck that had just gone crashing into the forest ahead of them. I asked them if they'd seen anything else, and they said, no, not really. Of course not. They were too blinded by speed and schedules to really see. They were so intent on getting from point A to point B that they were missing almost everything in between. Don't be like those hikers. Instead of charging off after illusionary treasure at the end of the trail, stop to pick up the gold pieces along the way. In other words, sit down. John Burroughs once said, if you were to sit under an oak tree for an entire day, you would have enough information to write an entire book. The first time I read that, I thought it would be impossible. But since I was also young and curious, I went ahead and tried it. I sat under an oak tree for an entire day, and I was amazed. Had I been able to record it all, I could have filled volumes with the beauty and drama that passed before me. But I find that many people are bored with sitting. They ask me, Tom, how can you sit in a trail for 4 or 5 hours at a stretch, much less an entire day? I'm tempted to ask them how they can sit in front of a television set for 4 or 5 hours watching nothing but a series of flashing lights. The world of nature is at least alive and real, and it's constantly putting on an elegant and dramatic display. As far as I'm concerned, it's the greatest show on earth. People get bored with it because they have not let go of their concept of time and learned the rewards of patience and solitude. Don't let speed and time rob you of wonder and discovery. Slow down, better yet, sit down. Become an inconspicuous stump, an all-seeing eye. When you are truly still, both without and within, then nature will to unfold its secrets. Let go of your worries. Many times we carry into the woods a load of mental baggage that is far heavier than anything we carry on our backs. We stride along through the forest, country, or beachside as though our primary purpose were to fret over the past or worry about the future. An argument with the boss, an unpleasant phone call, an overdrawn checking account, a duty not done. Such things preoccupy us in the city, so we unconsciously entertain them in the country. But the heart of nature is not the place to settle these accounts. A far better approach is to say to yourself, listen to me, body, mind, and spirit. I hereby give you permission to take the weekend off. A weekend out of your lifetime. I know there are things left undone. I know there are loose ends and frayed nerves. But for the next 2 days or 2 hours or however long it is, you are going to give yourself a vacation. You are going to be totally committed to living in the now. You are going to leave the shackles of society behind. Forget about your job, your checkbook, your bank account, your duties and debts, your shoulds and should nots, and just live. And honestly, that paragraph right there is why I chose this chapter for today, because I need to do that very thing. Henry David Thoreau, one of the greatest nature observers of all time, puts the same thought in a slightly different way. Says he in Walden, if you are ready to leave father and mother and brother and sister and wife and child and friends and never see them again, if you have paid your debts and made your will and settled all your affairs and are a free man, then you are ready for a walk. Let death be your guide. The art of nature observation is not separate from the art of living. Remembering this, one of the most valuable things you can do is to live each day as though you should die tomorrow. Difficult as it is to construct such a scenario, it has tremendous power to enhance your perceptions. I know several people who have had near-death experiences. One was hit by a truck. He spent 3 months in a coma, and when he regained consciousness, he didn't even remember the accident. When it dawned on him that he almost died, he was then struck by the realization that he had not ever really lived. Now it's hard to keep up with him. He has been reborn. He doesn't waste time. He doesn't fret over the past and the future. He doesn't worry about what people think of him. While he used to enjoy nature with well-mannered reservation, he now thrashes through the brush as eagerly as a dog. He stops to smell the flowers, hug trees, and talks freely to animals. Some people think he is strange. I think he is alive. You don't have to have near-death experience to come alive. The truth is, we never know when our moment might be. So just realize that. Pretend that you only have a week to live. What would you do? How would you relate to the people in the world around you? Most likely, you would be even more awake and alive than you are right now. That's aliveness. That aliveness is an important requirement for absorbing more of nature's messages. Be quiet. Another requirement is to keep noise to a minimum. It should be obvious that you will experience more in nature if you are silent. But it bears repeating, partially because most of us are so addicted to chatter. We talk almost constantly at work and at play. We make our livings weaving arguments and advertisements. We fill our lives with social gatherings, live streams, our general gossip, and we install electronic devices in our homes and ears that amplify the sounds we produce. It is through quiet solitude where a deadly disease that could only be controlled by a stream of noise and confusion. On the other hand, in nature, silence is the rule and noise is the exception. Most animals communicate more by gesture and touch than by sound. Sound in nature broadcasts an animal's presence, and the wrong sound at the wrong time can mean an animal's death. Sound also serves as warning to animals. Since man is the world's most lethal predator, the human voice is almost always a danger signal that causes wildlife to run and hide. And most animals have a highly acute sense of hearing. Take care then to keep your talk to a minimum. Try to preserve the flow of nature by moving as quietly as possible. If you see something beautiful, communicate it by sign language, as Native Americans did. Imagine that your own life depends on remaining quiet, as it might someday in a survival situation. Well, one thing I want to add this week, two very important people in my life passed on. One was a tracker student named Aaron Fletcher. He died of lung cancer in his 40s because he was into hardscaping and breathing concrete dust. But the other loss that I feel that hurts me insanely deeply is Mr. Bob Erickson. Bob and his wife Joan are in their 80s, and in the early 70s in Illinois, they started a nonprofit called the Sun Foundation on a 2,900 acre piece of land that I was blessed to live on for a few years. Their son, Brett Erickson, is a longtime tracker student, and their grandparents bought the property in the Illinois River Valley, which is Monsanto corn and soy desert, except for this pristine 2,900 acre piece of land that has 5 different ecosystems on it. And one of the reasons I was so anxious to get on the road to collect interviews is because I knew Bob and Joan were getting older and I wanted to see them. And he actually passed on my father's birthday. And one thing I loved about living there is most of the time, the only man-made sound you heard was your own breathing and your heartbeat. Anyway, don't analyze. Talking is actually only part of the problem. We also have to deal with the barrage of thoughts ricocheting through our heads. We are a society of reasons. If we aren't talking, we are usually thinking. And with our thoughts, we build elaborate barriers between ourselves and our experience. Some people cannot look at a waterfall without calculating its height. How many gallons per second are flowing over the lip? And how many other waterfalls in the world are larger or smaller? Some people no sooner sit down by a pondside than they begin to wonder why they are there and what the worth of it is. The comparison, the analysis, the reasons are all walls that fence us off from a deeper reality. Experience nature without analyzing. See without labels. Only that way will you begin to experience the beauty that is beyond words. Let go of names. There is a natural tendency in all of us to give names to things. It is the way we have of ordering the world and feeling more comfortable in it. When we are introduced to a new person, the first thing we do is learn a name to associate with the face. If we can remember it the next time we see that person, we feel a bond of familiarity. We feel we know that person. In reality, though, we know very little about that person. The name in itself is only a convenience, only the beginning of a familiarity that can go anywhere or nowhere. The depths of love or friendship we finally attain with any new acquaintance will depend on how far we are willing to look beyond the name. The same is true with the things in nature. Since we can't communicate as easily with rocks, plants, and animals as we can with our own kind, there's an even greater tendency to learn the name and be done with it. Most people collect names instead of information and experience. A new bird or mammal is a wonder to behold, but too often, once the gray-cheeked thrush or the 13-lined ground squirrel is matched with the illustration in the guidebook, the mystery is gone, and the observer goes his or her way with nothing more than a longer list of animals. The list may be impressive, but it cannot contain much real knowledge. Stalking Wolf knew very well the dangers of naming when he was teaching Rick and me to look at nature many years ago. But periodically, I have had to relearn the lesson. Not long ago, for instance, I took some children on a nature walk. And whenever they discovered a new plant or animal, they were overwhelmed with excitement and wonder. Then they would ask what it was. When I said, that's a potato bug, or that's a bull thistle, they would immediately say, oh, and go on to the next bull thistle. And they would immediately say, oh, wait, let me get through that. And go on to the next thing as though there were nothing more to be learned. It finally dawned on me that I was robbing them of the mystery. Shortly after that, a little friend of mine picked up a snail from the grass and held it out to me, asking what it was. I said, sit down and hold it in your hand. The boy sat down and watched the snail. Gradually, the animal poked its feelers out of its shell and began traveling across the little boy's hand. How does it feel? I asked. It feels hard, but really slimy. Feels like there's something licking and grasping my skin. How does it talk? I asked. Hey, it ain't got no mouth. How does it see? It ain't got no eyes either. Soon the boy was on his own. He and his friends spent the rest of the afternoon making discovery after discovery because their imaginations weren't stifled by names. When you come right down to it, names are only convenient tags we hang on things to make them identifiable. The name oak may be useful for identifying a popular kind of tree, but it says nothing about how the tree's roots grab the earth, how it sings in a wild storm, how it whispers in a soft wind, or how it rattles after a fire comes into its leaves in the fall. It says nothing of the 5 foods and 4 medicinal parts of that tree, or the birds and animals that live in and around it. You could just as easily tag your own name onto it. For where you find one name, you will find others. The mountain lion is also called the cougar, the wildcat, the puma, and the rock cat. But none of these names describe its sleek body, the silence of its footsteps, or the dignity and defiance in its eyes. Everything worth knowing about the animal lies beyond the name. So don't get caught up in names. Concentrate on concepts, feelings, and sensations. Most of all, concentrate on interacting with the things you encounter in nature. Know the soul before you know the name, and you will experience much more. Nothing is commonplace. Many people see a pine tree or a robin and think because they've seen it so many before, there's nothing new to see. But the newness is always there, lying just beyond the veils of habit and assumption. No two pine trees are just alike. Even the pine trees you looked at a moment ago is no longer the same as it was. Everything is changing. Everything has more to show us than we have yet perceived. The commonplace is only the self-constructed wall that separates us from the marvelous. True observation goes beyond these artificial boundaries. An observer who really wants to know a robin will not be content to look it up in a guidebook and watch it hop around on the lawn. He or she will investigate, where is it? I lost my place here. He or she will be interested in everything about it, what it eats besides worms, where it sleeps, how it copes with cold weather, how it avoids predators, the range of emotions expressed in its calls, the warmth and softness of its body, its flight pattern, everything from the arrangement of feathers to the color of the toenails. There is no end to the inquiry involved in really knowing an animal or anything else. No limit to the depths we can reach if we are willing to create the world anew each day. Follow your heart. When the naturalist John Muir first came to California, he was asked where he was going, and he said with enthusiasm, "Any place is wild." All his life, Muir followed his heart. He traveled like a butterfly, sailing on every eddy and dancing compliance to any wind. His spontaneity led him down the wildest, leafiest pathways to some of the freshest observations of nature ever recorded. I like to travel like a butterfly too. In fact, I cannot help it. One morning, I'll tell my wife, Judy, I'm going to the barn to get something, and I'll come back hours later after going miles out of my way. Something catches my eye, something captures my imagination, and when that happens, it's almost impossible to resist following my inclination, wherever it might lead. More often than not, it does not lead down the beaten path, but along a little used or non-existent trail. That's where the most fresh discoveries are made. First of all, the beaten path is where everybody else goes. The natural flow of life is found in the heart of the woods, away from the man-made roadways and trails. Of course, you'd first better make sure you won't get lost, but wherever you go, go with a sense of adventure and spontaneity. If you are attracted to a thick carpet of moss on an old boulder, stop and run your hands over it. If you have a hunch there are deer in a meadow, slow your pace and take a careful look. If you have a sudden urge to climb a particular tree, climb the tree and discover what it has to teach. Don't interrupt your inner urgings. Such impulses bubble up from the very cauldron of creativity, and they can put you in touch with nature much faster than a car or inflexible schedule. Let go of inhibitions. Wow, that's a long chapter. In all my classes in nature observation, there is at first a holding back, a reluctance to let down and become spontaneous. The spontaneity has been stifled by jobs, responsibilities, cares, and worries. And above all, by the question of what will people think? My answer to that is, who cares? Then to go get To get my students to loosen up, I do a little exercise with them. I say, okay, for the next 5 minutes, I want each of you to do something totally outrageous, something not like you, something ridiculous. Once they realize there is no getting out of it, I see students doing a variety of unusual things. Climbing trees, yelling at the top of their lungs, diving into swamps with all their clothes on, slithering through the bushes like snakes, hopping across the landscape like frogs and rabbits. Whatever they do, they discover they enjoy it immensely, because at last they have permission to act foolishly. The point, of course, is not to make a fool of yourself. It is to break down that barrier of rigidity that comes with habit, to tear off the stifling masks of society that cover up your real face, your true self. If you occasionally force yourself to fly off the handle to do something crazy, it's much more likely the next time you get an urge to follow your heart, you will allow yourself to do it instead of making excuses and staying stuck in the same old rut. Boy, there's a lesson in that one for me. Let go of prejudices. Another attitude that severely limits our experiences of nature is the preconceived idea of what it's going to be like. There are many people who would immensely enjoy an off-trail exploration or other invigorating adventure, but who manage to talk themselves out of it. Oh, there might be bugs, snakes, or poison ivy. It might be wet. I might get dirty. The water will be probably too cold. The excuses are endless. Worse yet, these people are so prejudiced that they can hardly experience anything. They have actually reprogrammed their reactions so they're blinded to the reality of a new experience. No one really knows what an adventure will be like. That is the nature of adventures. They are totally new experiences. To a certain extent, you just have to trust and stay open to the surprise. If you don't allow prejudice to interfere, you will widen your experience and learn some exciting new things. Rick and I used to explore our little corner of the planet as though we were space travelers who had just landed on Venus. Our own cloud-shrouded planet is far more fascinating than Venus or Mars. The only thing that keeps us from being constantly awed by is the mistaken belief that we've seen it all before. The fact is, we've hardly even begun to see it. And being that we are coming up on an hour, I'm going to read this last one, and this is the most important part of this chapter. And I will finish this chapter on Monday. Immerse yourself in nature. Dive right into nature without telling yourself what it's going to be like. Don't pass a swamp and say, nice swamp. Get your ass into it. Sink down neck deep in that primal ooze. Come face to face with frogs. Feel catfish nuzzle your legs. Watch dragonflies dart in front of your eyes. Don't be a spectator. If you're only a spectator, your experience will be little more than that of a person who goes to a museum or reads the plaques on showcase windows. Don't separate yourself from nature. Embrace it and allow yourself to be embraced by it. Then you will begin to feel its beauty and power. Sometimes this power can be experienced in a very literal sense. Off the New Jersey coast, there is a jetty called the Big L. It juts out into the ocean like a crooked finger. And whenever I'm near it, especially in a storm, I can't resist going out there and feeling the pulse of the ocean. Once during a raging storm, I stood out on the end of that jetty half naked. The waves were tremendous, pounding the rocks and my body in magnificent concert of surf and spray. Coincidentally, a concert of another sort had just let out on the beach, and I could see people from the nearby hall bundling themselves against the wind and hurrying along the boardwalk to the safety of their cars. Occasionally, someone would look up and point in my direction, but nobody joined me. I had the feeling they thought I was crazy. If I was, I'm glad of it. It is a lot better to be crazy than be cut off from the marvels of nature. mummified with rigidity and entombed in a casket of comfort. Don't just look at nature from afar. Saturate yourself with it. Get out of the edge of life and let the waves of the wilderness wash over you. Feel the power. Listen to the crashing roar. Let the wind buffet your body and sweep the cobwebs from your brain. Immerse yourself in nature's symphony and let your senses burst with joy. Wow. So, there is still a little bit left to that chapter that I'll finish up during the next episode. But I think those of you, I'm sure many of you in here right now have read that chapter once, twice, 1,000 times. I have read it countless times. And just like with all my dad's work, I learn something new every time I read it. Or I see it from a different facet because I'm older, because I have more experience. And, as I said, when I developed Future Nature and Trackolytes, it's essentially based, everything I'm trying to do is based on that chapter. I'm trying to get people to wake the F up and start noticing the beauty around them. Start wanting to live life and not just let life happen to them. To, instill the way of the caretaker. To show them a different way to move that is much better for their bodies and much quieter in the woods. To show them how to use wide angle vision so they can take bigger pictures and take more information in. And the thing that I live for most of all is when I teach somebody, whether it's wide angle vision or stalking and movement, and you can see them struggle at first, and then all of a sudden you see it click together and they come back and their eyes are just like, they look like they took 5,000 hits of LSD. And they're just like, I never realized how much that is out there. And that's why, people like myself and my father, and I'm sure many of you, there was at the last place I lived, I was on 15 acres of mature Pacific Northwest rainforest. There was one day I spent 7 hours just exploring all the facets of this one giant stump that had turned into a nursery stump. And then I started to go around to other stumps, and I realized that each stump was its own universe. Sure, they shared some of the same species, but not always. And, then you start asking the sacred question, what happened here? What is this teaching me? Why is this type of moss on this stump, but not on this stump? And you realize because the other stump is in more sunlight than the other stump. And, one thing I'm really thankful for about what I do and what I teach people to do is that when you learn to become more aware, the term boredom can be erased from your dictionary completely. Because people who are truly awake, aware, alive can find mystery in anything. They can pick up an object and relive the moment the first time they held it in their hand, or look at a photograph and be instantly taken back. Because when we learn to switch from tunnel mindedness to wide angle mind, our memory, the way we memorize things, and our memories themselves are wide angled. Our memories are far more rich and recallable. My favorite oak tree in the whole world on the old Tracker farm in New Jersey. I'm actually looking for the piece of bark. Anyway, I have not physically seen that tree, touched it, done anything, in 25 years. But I can close my eyes and I can remember exactly how it feels the last time I wrapped my arms around that grandmother oak tree to say goodbye to her when we moved off that farm. Just like I can perfectly feel what the archway going into grandfather's camp feels like, or the big pitch pine tree that's right in the center of camp. I'm very kinesthetic. I have a very good touch memory, and when I think back to those things, I can be transported back to those points in space and time. So, with that being said, anybody have any questions or thoughts they want to add about tonight's chapter? I need some tea or something. And as I mentioned in the first one of these, part of this is also to prepare to make my father's books available as audiobooks, hopefully. So yeah, that's another thing that I'm working on, try to bring to fruition. I've just got about 3,100 other problems I need to figure out first. But another selfish reason why I started this show was, at this point in my life, after a lifetime of practical experience and 27 years of teaching experience, I find myself in the most precarious place that I have yet to be in my entire 46 years, with so much uncertainty ahead of me. And I physically can't think too much about the future because it will literally cause me to go crazy. So I have blocked my day off into hour-long blocks. And I do, whatever's in front of me, whatever I have the tools to do at that moment in space and time, I do as best a job as I can and I move on. And that's why, one of the reasons I'm waiting on my stuff to arrive from California before putting my classes up, my online class season up, even though in theory I could pull off a perfectly wonderful class that you would watch and think was amazing, but it wouldn't be to my standards because there are certain things I need from down there, to make that happen. And if you are going to choose to devote your, time and your money to learn from me or listen to me talk, then you deserve nothing less than, 110% of me. 100%, 100% T3 experience, as I call it. And yeah, I don't want to, ever give anybody anything but my all. And it's a wonderful gift, but it's also been a curse that's gotten me into trouble. In fact, part of the reason why I'm in the situation I currently am in and have been in for the past 4 years is by living what I preach and being a caretaker and having people with ill intent recognize those characteristics in me and exploit that. And so you almost have to learn how to develop when you become more aware and you truly start to develop a deep sense of empathy for everyone and everything around you. You need to be careful, because there are predators that pick up on that stuff, and they will take you for everything you're worth. And trust me, because not only my client, I am also the president. Yeah. And I so desperately want to be able to believe in every person I meet and have interactions with. I so desperately want to believe that every person on earth is capable of good and doing good works and being good to other people. And sometimes that faith has been taken advantage of. And so not only have I learned all these new business skills, but I've also had to learn how to protect myself through contracts and things like that. All because I'm like, oh, there's no way this person's gonna not follow through, only to have them not follow through, and me so appropriately stuck with the bill. But no matter how many bad things happen to me or have happened to me in my life, they only make me stronger. Every situation I look at as a chance to learn something. And no matter how hard it is to do, as the chapter mentioned, always try to be in the moment, because nothing is guaranteed. A meteor could hit right now. Who knows? So live life for all it's worth. Hug those and love those around you that are close to you. As my father says, marvel at the song of butterfly wings and at the colors of sunsets, and be like the mice people and look small and find grandeur in the small things that 99 out of 100 people will walk by dozens of times and never notice. That's another secret to my photography. But let me take a minute to look at comments here. I also too have ADD, and I actually have number dyslexia, which makes being a business person even more fun. Let's see. Yeah, it's there's environments because yeah, exactly. Charlie Mount. I was in a polyamorous relationship for a year and a half, and now my former partner, who we'd been together for 10 years, and we met a woman who we had fun with and was a great person and a nature educator. And only after a little while did I start to figure out that she would do things to purposely cause me to have an anger reaction. And I could never understand why until the first time I met her parents, and I realized that it's the exact pattern that her parents use. If her dad didn't get angry at something that her mom did, her mom would take that as him not caring or loving her. So, one thing I think it is our job, it is our duty to do, if there is a meaning to life other than being a caretaker, it is to learn good things from our parents and repeat them, learn the bad things from our parents and put those to rest, and become the next evolution of our parents. And that's been one of the frustrating things with me is I have so much to teach and so many new lessons to offer. And I'm getting ready to put my schedule up as soon as I get my stuff. And I'm just praying that, people, see it for what it's worth, because, there's only a couple of Tom Browns in the world that have as much, as much dirt time as this one here. And, I often these days go online, and even though I'm excited for the person because they're being successful, but, watching people who I taught how to do their basic skills, teaching online classes that have 30 or 40 people, and then I put a schedule up and I get 4, and I'm just, sacred questioning the heck out of those types of things. And I know a lot of it has to do with my lack of business knowledge and not having any money to advertise, but yeah, there's still some things that I puzzle over. One thing I can tell you for sure is that sacred questioning business stuff is not nearly as fun as sacred questioning nature things. Anyway, let's see any comments. I would like to know the true history of the tracker knife. Okay, really quick, I can go over that. So, it all starts. My dad had an idea, for a knife that essentially was like, a Leatherman, a multi-tool, kind of a multi-tool of knives, a knife that could serve multiple purposes. And if you look at the tracker knife, and I don't have one nearby, as it is today, it's got that front section with the curve in it. That's meant, for skinning, maybe peeling bark off a tree. Then you've got that straight section for your carving. Depending on which maker and which model you got, some had a saw. I've seen some that have like a bow drill handhold socket in the handle, which really scares the hell out of me. Like, I would not want to be doing bow drill with a skinny handle with a knife where I could slip and point the knife up like this and fall on it. There was one maker that made an arrow shaft straightener in the blade, but the official history of the tracker knife is the first person to make one, make a version of a tracker knife, was a guy named Bear, also known as Sun Bear, who was a huge part of my life as a kid, who passed on many years ago. The first person to make them commercially available was a guy named Ed Lomby. Ed Lomby was making the tracker knife, for 10 years before Dave Beck came and took his, first class. And, I will say this, though, out of all of the makers, Dave Beck's are the nicest. And then, of course, you have, when Ed Lomby, there was somebody else in between, then Dave Beck for a while. And then there's been several people who have made limited runs. A friend of mine's father made like a couple out of this steel called cobalt dendritic steel, that in order to forge it, you need to use magnets. One really cool thing that I'm hoping when I do make it back to New Jersey and go through my dad's nature stuff in his study is one of the Damascus versions that was made by Tops Knives. They're really sweet. Personally, as someone who, uses knives and tools and things like that, the tracker knife in and of itself is very good for what it's designed for, which is to be, a multi-purpose tool. If you were to only have one thing in your bag, that can serve multiple purposes. But, typically when I go out into the woods, I carry, looking for it right now. Two things I bring in my kit are, where's the second one? heck? How do you lose an axe in a tiny bedroom? Must be losing my mind. Oh, wait, maybe it's on my bed. Oh, yeah. So 2 things I always go anytime I'm going out for, an extended trip, or I'm leading a class on a survival trip is, the first is a big kind of chopping parang style knife. It can make things like building shelters, stuff like that really easy. Another thing I always carry is this. This is something I have dreamed about my entire life. I used to compete in tomahawk throwing competitions when I was a little kid. And I'm very deadly with them. And I always wanted a custom camp axe / tomahawk that had and could, just like the tracker knife, be used multiple ways. So I had my friend Caleb from Booth Blacksmithing. After sitting down with him, we came up with this. So the handle is Osage. It's off a tree that I cut down with some friends about 20 years ago. And the reason why the handle is curved like this is because if I want to chop down a tree, I'll choke up way at the bottom and chop down my tree. But let's say I need to take the limbs off a sapling, then I can come up to here, and quickly do that. And then if I want to skin a deer or an elk, I can choke up on it and use it for that. I've even made a bow drill kit, figure 4 trap, and a lot of the basic skills, with this. And then the reason why I've got this little doohickey here is when I'm chainsawing, you saw a log, and if you keep going, you get your chain in the dirt. So I use this to hook into the log and pull it towards me. And that's what this little whoop is right here. So it's perfect for that. And then, of course, on the back, you can always use a good hammer. So, in this one tool, I've got, something for self-defense and something quite utilitarian. And in fact, both of these, I have this waxed tin cloth case where the axe kind of slides in the bottom and the knife slides in on the top. And it's, and then there's a strap that comes up underneath the axe head, and it's got a sling on it so you can wear it across your back. And I actually have a setup where I can strap this to my quiver with my bow and my arrows, which attaches to any number of my go bags that I have, depending on what season it is and things like that. But you'll be seeing a lot more, as I continue to suss out what types of works I'm going to be doing. I do plan on greatly enhancing my YouTube channel and having all sorts of instructional stuff, all sorts of philosophical things, and stuff like that. Because frankly, I am over Meta and Facebook because they have caused me so much financial problems. But when my account got hacked, just as I was starting my new business, after I had lost my life savings, my account got hacked that I had started in 2007, where I had 7,000 friends. My account got hacked on like June 21st, 2022, over 4th of July weekend. $8,000 went missing out of my business and personal bank accounts and my PayPal. Thankfully, that got returned. But then 30 days later, Facebook just deleted this page that I had for over 20 years, or like 18 years, and nobody was responding to me. So of course I started a new Facebook page, and because my name is what it is and my phone number has been the same forever, and my social security number what it is, my new account has been instantly flagged ever since. And, I have invested way too many hours into trying to get my rights to fully use social media as a tool to cue people in on what I'm doing. And it's really disgusting, that I lost all of that and for, was never given a chance to, I clicked the dispute this thing. I tried changing my password and, I stopped counting it over like 250 hours that I invested trying to just reach somebody at the company. And the way I eventually did it is I actually had to pay to become verified to give you access to an actual human. So, yeah, that's kind of lame for the biggest corporation in the world. But unfortunately, that's the way things work these days. And one thing I'll say about my dad is he never had to do a lick of marketing. His marketing were the words that I just read to you and word of mouth. And, I've essentially had to follow the same path as best I could, best I can digitally. But unfortunately, it's a pay to play world we live in now. There's a guy 20 minutes from here who has a 1/32 of the experience in what I teach. And he has full classes every weekend because he spends $25,000 a quarter on Google AdWords and Facebook advertising. And I'm just like, how am I, what am I supposed to do with that? So I'm just going to keep doing things like this. I also host the first Wednesday of every month a 2-hour live session on my website. That's a Zoom session. I may move this over to Zoom as well, just so I can see people's faces and we can interact a little bit better. But thank you all for attending episode number 3, Monday night, 5 p.m. I will be back here. And I think once you subscribe and click notify me on the live streams, it'll remind you, when the streams are. But Mondays and Fridays, 5 p.m. Pacific. And that's also the auctions for the illustrations, the original illustrations from my father's field guides. They start Monday mornings at 11 a.m. Pacific and Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific. One that's going up this week is the good old-fashioned figure 4 trap. And now we've got my dad's writing on the back. My sister did the art. So yeah. And 50% of the money I raise with those of selling of the illustrations, I'm sending directly to Rick Barry, who's handling the efforts to preserve the Pine Barrens, and my stepmom Celeste for, to help things with Tracker School a little bit. I plan on going back to New Jersey a little whiles before my dad's celebration of life event, where I'm going to be running a single day class with a suggested donation. And I'm going to give 100% of the proceeds to the Tracker School and or the efforts to maintain control of the primitive camp, a place that is sacred to anybody who's ever been there. So, I like to use the metaphor, I'm a tree that was grown by my father, and my father was the Tracker School. And if you don't water the roots of a tree, it can't grow or it'll wither and die. So even though, I could, use any and all money generated by the illustration auctions, I gladly send half of it back to my roots, as I say, because it's just what my dad told me to do. Anyway, everybody, peace, love, joy, and purpose to you all. I hope to see you all next week. And I also, I'll be doing some other live streams on here and through my website as well. So thanks again. Spread the word about this as well, being that I have a limited access to people on social media. So tell people Mondays and Fridays at 5, T3 reads TBJR. Until next time, peace, love, joy, purpose to you all. Go outside. Don't be afraid to get cold or hot or wet or dirty, because those things are real. All this stuff, these square right angles, not real. Well, it is real, but it's not real. All right, y'all. Love you. Blessings.